May the Lord give you peace. Welcome to Hold Back Nothing. I'm Brother Tyler Harris, and I'm a young friar who fell in love with the beautiful and dynamic way of seeing the world and growing in relationship with Christ that is our Franciscan vision. This series is all about exploring that rich and diverse Franciscan heritage, spirituality, and way of life. In our previous episodes, we explored how important figures in our Franciscan tradition, like Francis, Clare, and Bonaventure, understood the Eucharist. We also reflected on what deeper Eucharistic living entails in terms of care for creation, or welcoming the poor and marginalized, or seeing the immense goodness and dignity within each person. But we always need to keep wrestling with how we can apply this Eucharistic vision in our day-to-day life. How can the Eucharist sustain each of us personally in our day-to-day Franciscan-hearted living? How does the Eucharist call each of us to practice servant leadership in our day-to-day life? Those are our questions today as we continue to reflect on the role of the Eucharist in our Franciscan vocations and ministries. To help guide us in our reflections, I am joined by my Franciscan brother, Roger Lopez. Roger currently lives in Oceanside, California, and serves as a counselor in the administration of our coast-to-coast province of Our Lady of Guadalupe. Brother Roger, welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
It's a wonderful treat to spend this time together. I'm very grateful for this time to reflect on the Eucharist and our life as friars together. To get us started, Roger, why don't you share a little bit about how you found yourself joining the Franciscans and where your Franciscan journey has taken you so far?
Yes. I looked at when I first started. I looked at diocesan priesthood. I grew up in Florida in the Panhandle. My father was in the Navy, and so that's kind of where we landed. And so I looked at diocesan priesthood, and for some reason it did not click. I didn't know. I couldn't articulate at the time why that was. But I was taught by a small group of religious brothers in high school, so I knew about religious life, and I went to the internet and put my name in for Vision magazine or Vision website, and got a deluge of a lot of different religious communities. So what happened was I kind of started going through them and realized that there were a couple that I wanted to go and do a come and see. And one of them was the Franciscans that were in the province of St. John the Baptist in Cincinnati, Ohio. And I didn't know anything about Francis. I once again grew up pretty much in a diocesan parish. That was really my life. Knowing about Francis came much later in my vocation, my initial vocation. But really, what drew me to the friars were doing dishes with them after a come and see. Everything was pretty normal, but seeing them in the kitchen, putting away food, washing dishes, laughing, telling stories, making fun of each other. Every friar can relate to this. It still happens today. It happens in the kitchen that's just a few feet from me. It happens so much. So that's really what drew me in. And I realized as time went on that these brothers were really living into the spirit of Francis as I learned more about our seraphic father. Some of the ministries that I've done throughout, I started off with doing street ministry in the inner city of Cincinnati. And that was a dramatic shift because I grew up in the suburbs, pretty much, upper middle class. That was a very big difference. I've worked at kitchens, for dining, traditionally called soup kitchens. I've done hospital chaplaincy and hospital ministry, college campus ministry. And the most recent that I did was prior to my role in our provincial administration was for 8 years, I taught at our Franciscan high school. I was a high school teacher in Cincinnati at Roger Bacon. And that was a great experience.
Over the past 6 episodes in this series, we've heard a lot of different vantage points on our Franciscan life and the depths and beauty of our life as they continue to unfold. You've now been a friar for 16 years. What gives you hope and excitement for this Franciscan life today?
It's a great question. When I look at I realize I continue to grow into my vocation and my understanding of what it means to be a Franciscan. It's a continuous revelation, and I've done the academic study of our tradition, which is rich and beautiful. I've lived with the brothers, and I've read biographies of Francis and all these things. And probably more than anything else that I'm drawn and I draw hope from is that Francis was able to understand and experience the beauty of the created world of
Mm,
nature. We see that in the canticle, right? He praises all of creation, and it's more than just this romantic brother, sun, sister, moon, right? It's more than that.
yeah.
As beautiful as that is, and I know that kind of depends on what school of thought you're in, but he really had an insight of relationship and the beauty. I mean, Pierre de Chardin talks about this, right? The world is charged with the goodness of God. I mean, this is something that's not even just that. We see this within the patristics. We see this all throughout. Bonaventure even talks about it, right? The vestiges that we see within creation. But when we're looking at all these things, Francis was able to tap into and see that. And I guess I've really kind of taken that part. Is that the world is just drips with God's goodness, just drips all over. And I realize that my invitation is to see that goodness everywhere. And if I can see it, then I can really kind of tap into that and make it part of me. And then I, in turn, am called to bring it to others. That hopefully the goodness that has transformed me, I can then bring to others to let God's goodness transform them. You know, every friar reads the life of Thomas of Celano,
Hmm.
right? And it's so interesting. So Thomas Celano is a friar, and he's actually the one who's kind of commissioned to write the biography of Francis after his death when preparing for canonization. But what's so interesting is that when you read the biography of Celano on Saint Francis, he starts off with says like in the second year of his conversion, in the eighth year of his conversion, talking about Francis, in the 11th year of his conversion. And which I think Celano is reminding us is that Francis's whole life was about conversion. It's about that constant change, that constant progress. And that's really the invitation of the spiritual life.
Hmm.
All Christians, right? Is that we're all called into this conversion. I used to teach my students, we use the Greek word metanoia. So absolutely, I agree with you. It's like there's the beauty of that, we're called into this change of life that's every day, and hopefully that we find that gathered around the table of the Lord in the Eucharist.
Absolutely. And as we've been reflecting on in this series, for St. Francis, the Eucharist is all about that ongoing conversion. He talks about the Eucharist and penance side by side. And so that transformation and that newness of life we find in the Eucharist and ongoing conversion are two sides of the same coin for Francis. As you look back over your Franciscan journey, where do you see the impact of the Eucharist in your ministry? How do you see the Eucharist inspiring or energizing your growth as a Franciscan?
So when I was teaching, the house that I lived at, all of us worked at the high school. And morning prayer was at 6 a.m., followed immediately by Mass. Now, I don't know, 6 a.m. for me is not the best time of the day.
God
Um,
is still sleeping, I think, at that time, in my mind.
so, I'm waking up at 5:50 and I'm going into the chapel. And, we would not call this high solemn Mass at 6 a.m. This was low. All the portions were said. There was no homily, it was just some silence. So the liturgical experience was at its very simplest. And in no way does that rob the Eucharist of its power or importance. Is that in those moments, it can sometimes remind us of the very core of what the Eucharist is. It's gathering around that altar. We would stand, because the altar was in the middle of the room, and we'd stand around it in a very small little room. And there we would pray that Eucharistic prayer. Um, you know, myself or the other priests, we would alternate, and it's a powerful moment. It's very intimate, and I realized so much is that it would have been easy to just say, well, you know what, I'm just tired, I'm going to sleep in. It would have been easy to just say, well, do we need to have mass today? But for me, I realized is that for all of the challenges of teaching, right? Any teacher that's watching this knows exactly what I'm talking about, right? There's papers to grade. There's students' discipline to navigate. There's sometimes parents' challenges to navigate, administration, what they ask, all those things. But in the midst of all that, I realized that if how I start my day is with Him, with the very essence of life, and I come to Him saying, Lord, I just need your help today. And I start off like that. It's going to be a good day. It's going to be a good day. Uh, and yeah, so I found that that's probably one of the best things for me is that if I can start my day with the Eucharist, um, I can face the challenges that happen as life moves on, because there'll be plenty. But that's what I would say is that for me, turning to the Eucharist is a daily thing, in all of my all the challenges and even all the joys.
It's a wonderful reminder of the Eucharist really sustaining our ministry, but also orienting us
Mm.
in our ministry. If we turn to your present ministry, you're now, as you alluded to, in a leadership position, serving on our provincial administration. I wonder, how has the Eucharist inspired or guided your approach to leadership as a Franciscan?
When we look at the Eucharist, is that Francis talks about how 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 powerful and humble it is that God hides under a very piece of bread, right? That the Creator of all the world hides Himself under this piece of bread to become His body and blood. Is that very humility of Christ? And I guess so. When I look at our Franciscan leadership, it has to be bound so much within that humility. Because without that, it's easy. Christ talks about this, right? The rulers of this age, they lord it over, but not so with you, He tells the apostles. Not so with you. We're called to be servants. Called to be servants. When I tell people what I do, I said, you know what, my primary focus is to care and support my brothers. That is my primary focus, is to care and support them. So when I look at leadership, that element of leadership is that it has to be wrapped within that humility.
It's interesting in Francis's writings, whenever he talks about those with leadership responsibilities among the brothers, he often very quickly associates it with washing feet. That image of the Last Supper scene in John's Gospel of Jesus washing the feet of the apostles. Here is the author of humility par
Yes.
excellence, uh, bending down to wash the feet of his closest uh, followers. And that's this wonderful example of leadership for Francis, that those are the footprints he wants to follow. And even in his admonition, in Admonition 4, he writes, let those who are placed over others boast about that position as much as they would if they were assigned the duty of washing the feet of their
Right.
brothers. And I think that for a leader, someone responsible for caring for other people or managing a team. Um, what a different outlook on life, a different outlook on your position if you enter with that humility. We don't often boast about washing the floor or washing the car or washing the dishes. We'll boast about our positions on, LinkedIn or among the dinner table with friends or family. But if we approach it with that humility, and really see it as a position of caring, I mean, I think that's transformative of how we interact with other people in that capacity.
As I agree, I'm drawn to the rule of St. Clair,
Hmm.
to use a clarion image. St. Clair writes on the chapter on the abbess. And there's a quote that I'm always drawn to, and I used to use this with my students who were leaders. And Claire writes about the abbess, saying that the sisters will follow you not because of your title and lofty position, but they will follow you because of the virtue of your life and holy behavior. I mean, that's the reality. Like, if we all look at, people who we see as good leaders, those that we want to follow, it's not the title, it's not the provincial definitor, which is my official title. As sexy as that may sound, it will lose its luster very quickly. But the thing is that I follow those who live a life of integrity and respect, of holiness. That's who I want to follow.
And it really is an invitation into that service, into that humility that you spoke about earlier. And thank you for bringing in the Claire example, that we follow leaders by their example of virtue, and uh, their virtue and integrity is the most charismatic thing that attracts us. Francis is a wonderful example of that. He was a unique leader in that uh, shortly in his conversion, he had so many followers. Thousands of followers flocked to join him in a very short span of time. And so he really stands as a unique leader for us to learn from and to study his example. I wonder for those people, both friars and lay people alike, who find themselves in leadership positions and still desire to hold back nothing for Christ. What lessons on leadership do you think St. Francis can offer us today? Practical examples for people in their positions of leadership today.
I think first and foremost, one of the important lessons is that you have to let go.
Hmm.
You have to let go. And what does that mean? You know, Jesus talks about wineskins, right? You can't put old wine in new wineskins, or else they'll burst, right? Or you can't put new wine into old wineskins. There we go. That makes more sense. I can't put new wine into old wineskins, or else they'll burst. The fermentation piece, right? Uh, is that you have to have sometimes new frameworks. You have to realize is that the Holy Spirit may be calling you to look larger than yourself. So many times I've come to realize is that it's easy to say, well, this is my ecclesiology, this is my missiology, this is my. Notice that the pronoun, right?
Hmm.
This is mine, and that's not how God works. God's God invites us to let go and to allow His Holy Spirit to work, for His kingdom to come. And you know what? Sometimes it may be a lifestyle that we're not comfortable with. It may be a form of witnessing that we're not comfortable with. And that is scary. And I believe that whether you're a corporate executive or whether you're managing a small little nonprofit, whatever it may be, is that there's elements in your leadership style that the Lord is inviting you. You need to let go. Let go of your desires. Let go of your wants. Listen to me and listen to me through my people, and it'll happen.
It's a wonderful example of that Franciscan challenge or the challenge of Francis to see that nothing belongs to you,
Mm.
and to be open to letting go. I think the other thing it reminds me of, just listening to your reflection, is that theme of fraternitas, this expansive interconnectedness that we see ourselves as members of a community and see ourselves deeply enmeshed in a series of relationships so that nothing is really ever ours. It's always part of a bigger whole. And I think for a leader, seeing himself or herself as part of this wider community maybe makes it a little easier to let go of things because
Mm.
it's not theirs, it's not mine, it's ours. And the point of emphasis on making the decision is always for the betterment of the whole rather than what's advancing my ambitions or my aspirations. So just hearing this initial reflection um, really draws me to deeper into this reflection on seeing our relationships and our interconnectedness with other people as a
Mm.
leader.
I used to teach my students the definition of of charity, caritas in Latin, right? Is that love is I will the best for the other, even at the cost of myself.
Mm,
And leadership is called to be one that is rooted in love. The whole Christian life is. So if when I'm looking at what I'm supposed to do, if I will what's best for you, even though it may cost me, it may cost me sometimes even reputation. It may cost me in the sense of time and energy. There's a lot of things. It may cost me money. You're right, it may, but love always it makes demands on that. That's why it's the greatest of all the virtues. So I was thinking, yeah, absolutely. It's like it is difficult, but God's grace only allows us to be able to really live and to live out that love.
and that's a really powerful mindset shift. Like before the Friars, I was working in business. I managed a team. I don't think I often approached the workday as, oh, this is an opportunity to practice love or to practice charity. Um, and yet that is what a profound way to enter into those relationships if really we view it as desiring the good for the other and looking for ways to express charity in that day-to-day work. I mean, I think it opens us up to a dynamism in the in our relationships, in our work experiences, in our managing of responsibilities. Um, that without that mindset, it can become burdensome. It could become, you know, negative maybe. So I think that lens of viewing our leadership and responsibilities as channels for humility, yes, but also channels for love and sacrifice is very transformative. One of the other, I think, hallmark characteristics of Saint Francis is being a peacemaker. And I wonder, as you think about leadership, what lessons of Francis's peacemaking can we apply in leadership? What does a peacemaker as a leader look like?
Sure. I think when we're looking at peacemaking, when we're looking at that as leadership, is that peacemaking is more than just an absence of conflict. Because just because there's an absence of conflict doesn't mean that there's peace.
Hmm.
That's too superficial. Being a peacemaker means to sit in the middle of the discomfort, in the middle of the conflict, to listen and invite others to listen to each other. Peacemaking is a process, but I to use an image from one of our brothers, Father Murray Bodo. He talks. You can't be a peacemaker unless you have a peaceful heart.
Hmm.
Is that peace has to start here in myself? And I think when we're looking at leadership, what's your relationship with Christ? How much time do you spend with Him? What's your prayer life like, right? We know that the fruit, one of the fruits of the Holy Spirit is peace. Being that peacemaker is to go in the midst of where there is trouble, confident that the Lord is there and to be open to it, but to allow and to sit in and to listen and to allow people to talk. It's not to run away. It's to sometimes say the difficult things also.
It's going into the midst of the community. Again, seeing ourselves in this web of relationships. I love just clarifying that peace is not just the absence of violence. There's this human flourishing that ultimate peacemaking is working towards. And so really seeing ourselves as responsible for cultivating that flourishing for all of our neighbors. And when there is moments of tension, when there's moments of disagreement, going in there and paying attention, looking for the goodness in our all of our brothers and sisters, but working to cultivate that flourishing for all of us. I think one of the other hallmark characteristics of Francis is his joy, this incredible depth of joy and freedom that he just radiates.
Mm.
I think it's one of his most beautiful characteristics. And I'm reminded of that because in leadership positions, the responsibilities grow. They can become more burdensome, maybe more constraining, with more responsibilities, more deliverables and deadlines, more complicated relationships to manage. The challenges can keep growing. And so I'm curious, what do you think are some of the practical steps to help sustain that deeper joy, that really liberating and enduring joy that Francis radiated? What are some practical steps to sustain that uh, as leaders when life becomes more stressful or more demanding?
Francis really struggled with what he was trying. He struggled with what God was inviting him into. Was it a contemplative life? He would have loved. I believe he would have loved to have been a hermit his whole life. But he realized that, that great moment in front of the San Diamo cross, I'm reminded of that because the San Diamo crucifix is literally right in front of me, is that, he's there, he go rebuild my church, right? So he's being called also to an apostolic life. And we as Franciscans, we've talked about that balance between the contemplative and the apostolic. We call it an evangelical life, right? Is that but I think that's a very practical piece with every leader is that I don't think any leader has a problem with doing work. I see I can work hard and long. I have that propensity, sometimes even too much. And my brothers, they constantly check on me and call me on that. But I guess I look at it like this: is like, where's the balance in the life, right? There's as I was thinking about this, there's 1,440 minutes in a day. How many of those minutes are spent not just in prayer, but just maybe in silence? Now, don't get me wrong. I really believe that work can be prayer. Absolutely. And there needs to be time that's just wasting with the Lord. Wasting, right? Wasting time with the Lord. What's the percentage? Is it 2%? 30 minutes is only, that's only 2% of the day. I spend 33% trying to do sleep. And there's a lot of wisdom in Saint Benedict, having this balanced lifestyle. And that's one of the differences within our life. But I think one of the practical pieces is just take a moment and look and write down in your day, how much time do you work? How many minutes of work do you do in the work? How many minutes of sleep do you get? How many minutes do you socialize? Some type of, whether it's socializing with others, right? You can also include in there maybe some recreational time, hobbies, exercise, those type of things that are just for you. And then How much is for prayer, for silence, being still in front of the Lord? If you take a look at those percentages, do you think those are in the right priorities? Do you think they're in the right priorities? Now you could be like, well, Father, you don't understand. Hey, I understand completely. Francis warned Anthony whenever Anthony wanted to have the brothers go and start learning. And Francis said, I'll let them do it, but they can never, their studies should not extinguish the spirit of prayer and devotion. Man, it can get so extinguished.
Hmm.
It can get so extinguished. It's not just study, it's any work. But if we don't, if we, and I think that's the piece, is that if we continue to just focus on like, well, I need to do this, I need to do that. Once again, there's that pronoun versus I got to go and lean on the Lord for a little while. And I guess, especially now with this, my prayer life has really changed. It's expanded more of spending more time with the Lord. I don't think still enough. I don't like that percentage, but I'm working on it.
Well, thank you for leaving us with this wonderful image of wasting time with God, but also a bit of a homework assignment as well to check in and do the calculations. How much of our time is actually spent in prayer, just resting with God and noticing God's presence in our life. As always, to close our conversation, Saint Francis challenged his brothers and continues to challenge us today to begin again and to seek out holy newness in their life of faith. As we come to a close, what is a concrete way for us to hold back nothing of ourselves and bring our whole selves to the Eucharist in new ways?
I think one of the concrete ways that can help us to not hold back, it has to be in the sense of, have you fallen in love with Jesus Christ? How is that? How is that love for him? I think if we all look at it, if you're like, yeah, I kind of know a little about him, then are you ready to take the step to learn more? If you're like, I don't really know him at all, okay, then what do you need to do? Who do you need to talk to in order to make that jump? Who do you know in your life that is just on fire, not because of Christ, and reach out to them. If your relationship is good, then there's still many more things. I think when we're looking at this, is that to not hold back is to look at honestly that relationship and where do I need to take the next step in that. That's what I look at would be the best thing that I would invite everyone into is how is that relationship with Jesus and where does it need to go next?
Thank you, Roger. Thank you for uh, really bringing this element of love to the surface, both as a mindset that we can bring into leadership, but also on our day-to-day growing and journeying and traveling with the Lord each and every day. Thank you for challenging us to go much deeper in our prayer life, resting with God, but also to call to mind how much we can grow in love, grow in charity. These reflections really help me to better understand my relationship as a friar with the Eucharist. But I think your reflections are helping all of us to better understand how we can bring the servant leadership of St. Francis into our day-to-day life, how we can encounter the Eucharist at deeper and deeper ways and let the Eucharist really inform and orient us as we move through life. So thank you for your time and really thank you for sharing your Franciscan story and passion with all of us.
Thank you so much. And thank you for just kind of leading people in this journey of the multi dimensions of the Eucharist and how powerful it is and can be for all.
It's a beautiful mystery and we're just scratching the surface. There's a lot more to keep learning from it.
Amen.
Amen. As always, thank you to our viewers for letting us share our Franciscan life with you. I hope today's conversation helps you to catch glimpses of the Franciscan vision in your own life. Please join us again next Wednesday on Hold Back Nothing for our final episode reflecting on the Eucharist in light of our Franciscan life. We hope you will join us as we take a step back to reflect on lessons learned along this journey of Eucharistic revival. Until then, may the Lord bless you with peace and all that is good.